Let's come to our first speaker, Mr. Clement Boisseau. He is, let me just see my note here, Director of Strategic Planning at the BETC. I guess it's BETC Agence.
Exactly, yeah.
Good. Which is very much involved in doing design for clients such as Air France, Evian, Lacoste, Canal Plus, and has won various awards. And I'm going to come back to him in the second round, so I'm going to ask him now to tell us a little bit, not more than 5 or 6 minutes, please, how he sees the problem. And here's a special sort of challenge to him. Are some advertising agencies part of the problem in the sense of producing content for those who have an interest in climate disinformation? Clement, floor is yours. 5 minutes, please. And I'll wave my hands like this when you're getting close to your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this introduction. First of all, and before trying to answer your question, I wanted to thank Ricardo for inviting me to participate to this panel, because it could be a little bit counterintuitive to invite someone who's working in what I consider as the wonderful world of advertising. But I think it's the proof that first you have an open-minded spirit, and it is also the proof that we are all concerned by the climate change issue, and that we'll need all the energies, all the wills, all the skills to contribute solving this structural problem. And indeed, before sharing with you my point of view on how advertising agency and communication specialists can contribute to this fight for a more sustainable world, I would like to acknowledge a fact that we can't deny, and it's that advertising agency can be part of the problem we want to solve. And of course, our goal will become to be part of the solution. We can be part of the problem for I would say at least 2 reasons. The first one is, of course, that we produce information for corporations which sometimes have a goal which is not the one we want to achieve, because we want to maintain a certain business model which can be against what we try to do in order to solve climate change. But for me, it's not the biggest problem we have to face, and I will touch base on that. For me, the second reason which can make us part of the problem is that with advertising, with communication, we establish a very clear link between communication and consumption, and between communication and hyper-consumption, because we stimulate consumers' desires for things that maybe are not super useful, and it contributes to the belief that there's a kind of magical equation between consumption and happiness. But I think that all the reasons that make advertising agency part of the problem are exactly the same reasons that can make them potential part of the solution. And I would say that there's a few reasons that can demonstrate that point. The first thing is that actually—
Clement, sorry,
yes?
it's Guy here. I want you to hold your solutions till your second speech. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Can I ask you a question now in the problems?
Yes, yes.
As you said, sometimes advertising agencies can be part of the problem by promoting hyperconsumption. And sometimes, I guess, advertising agencies are for hire by, for example, not to single them out, big oil. Big oil may have an interest in spinning the story, but is this intrinsic to advertising, that advertising goes with those who will pay the money? Or do advertisers have a code of ethics, or is there a lack of a code of ethics? Is that part of the problem?
So actually, to be totally honest, we have a code of ethics. And even if we do communication for oil companies, I think that it's not so bad in itself, because when you do communication, you make information available and public. And honestly, I'm not sure that it would be a progress to stop talking. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm much more worried by companies who do not speak rather than by companies who speak. Because when you speak, when you say something, when you use your advertising agency to promote a message, it's the beginning of a conversation, and it's the beginning of a way to expose yourself to a conversation and to critics and to criticism. So I think that even if you produce content which is supposed to convince people to do something, it's the beginning of a conversation and of a journey towards confronting yourself to different point of view. When you draft and when you distribute messages to the people, you expect and you accept that they can reject your message. But I think the most important thing is to start dialoguing with people. So even if sometimes advertising agency can go where the money goes, as you say, their job in itself is a beginning of a solution because it's a beginning of a conversation. Okay. And on top of that, I think that, but I think it's a super interesting debate and conversation. We do not do advertising and communication for all the products. And for instance, you could completely imagine that we do not do communication for products which have very bad carbon footprint, and which are going to be prohibited. We do not do communication for products which are prohibited. So there's a kind of general framework and some rules.
Well, thank you for that. I think you really helped us understand part of the role of advertising agencies at the source. And I guess before we come back to you for more of the solutions, I just had one other quick question, understand the problem a little bit more. And this is my question to you. We're focusing here particularly on science and the role of science and the power of science. And I guess science works very much the level of information, rationality, and so on. Whereas advertising works more with the heart, not so much with the head, but with the heart, doesn't it? So is there a problem for advertising agencies to try to communicate science at the level of the head when their biggest power is at the level of engagement with people's emotions?
It's a very good question, and actually I would say it's much more complicated than what you say, because
I'm sure.
No, it's just because when you do communication, when you do advertising, of course you want to engage people. So, but the drivers to leverage in order to engage people are both rational and emotional. Of course, it's super important to create an emotion, so to talk to the heart, but people, and when we try to sell products to people, they become consumers, they are also very rational. So it's not true to say that we only leverage emotions to make them buy or understand something, because they are pragmatic, they are concrete people, so they want to combine two types of information, rational and emotional. And when you communicate for a company, the first question I ask to my client is what are, of course, the emotional, but also the very rational purpose, the usefulness, the utility you provide to people. So I think it's really a mix of both. And I think it's, of course, very complex, because when you talk about science, it's super rational and sometimes it's super complex. And when you try to deliver a message, you have to catch people's attention, and it's super complicated to deal with complexity. Indeed. So I think that maybe but I anticipate on the part of the solution, but we can help not to simplify complexity, but to make it understandable by people.
Super, thank you. So I think you have convinced me in my head and in my heart that advertising is not more orientated towards the emotional, and therefore it's not a skewed playing field for science, because you can have science in there. So thank you for that. So I understand the problem, and the nature of advertising is not necessarily against the rationality of science.